Well, while we're waiting for Omar, I'm going to start the meeting at 5:04. We'll take roll once he comes back, and if he doesn't, I'll take roll. But we'll use this opportunity for the time allotted for public comment. We do have a few members of the public here, so if you have something to say, now's the time to do it, particularly since we're waiting for our secretary. Okay, Mr. Thompson.
Hi, I just unmuted it. I didn't actually have anything to say.
Oh, you had me all excited.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of rolling up here ignorant of what's going on since I haven't participated in previous ones. There are a couple of pet things that I would like to have the committee, that I'd like to suggest to the committee.
You can do that now if
well,
that
that's a great
suits
time
you.
then. That suits me. Okay, so the freedom of migration plank. I believe that having it under the heading of securing liberty innately skews it toward a closed border stance because we're considering that to be a security issue. I think it will be better placed under Section 1 for personal liberty, because freedom of movement is a personal liberty issue. It's not a security issue. When we had it kind of closed border-ish, I can see it being under security, but I think with the current language, it would be better under personal liberty. And also under the firearm plank, I believe that we should add, where it enumerates the items out for it, that we should add firearm accessories to it, because when President Trump did all of his little bump stock bans and floated the silencer ban, a lot of Republicans defended it, saying, well, that's a firearm accessory. It doesn't fall under the Second Amendment. And I don't think that's the Libertarian Party's stance, even if it is the old party stance. So I would like to see firearms, ammunition, or firearm accessories on there, just to be explicit.
Very good. I think I agree with you on both of those. Those are good suggestions. Omar, how are you doing? I think he's having severe technical difficulties. This is going to be fun. Well, you guys are going to have to put up with me doing secretarial stuff and chair stuff simultaneously.
I hear you're familiar with it.
I'm familiar with that. We do them both. The committee gets a bit hairy. All right, so on the recording, I'm going to call out who is here, and Omar will be able to pick that up later for the minutes we have. And I'm just going to
on chat.
I'm sorry?
He just chatted.
Well, obviously everything on his end doesn't work. Would someone type into chat that maybe he wants to dial in on the phone? And I can do the screen share of the agenda and amendments. All right, so again, I'm going to go back to taking roll, and I'm going to do it because I don't have his attendance sheet. I'm just going to do it in order of listed on the participants side here. We have Richard Fast, Roger Roots, Al Meckley, Curry Taylor, David Van Horn, Matt Cholko, Alicia Matson for Aaron Starr, Curry Taylor, I think I already said, but it flipped around. Daryl Perry, Helen Gilson. You guys are flipping around here. Jim Fulmer, Kat Martin, Laura Epke, Richard Longstreth as alternate, but I believe all the LNC reps are present, and Thomas Knapp. Did I miss anyone? Is everyone I named besides Richard Longstreth voting as primary?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I
Yeah.
thought so, but I'm flying a little blind without being prepared with an attendance sheet. All right, let me share my screen. I'll pull up the agenda. Once I figure out what screen it's on, there it is. Okay, you guys should be seeing the agenda. Correct?
Yep.
Okay, awesome, because my screen just did something weird. Alrighty, so we did the call for order and attendance. We did the opportunity for public comment. So items remaining from the 4-2 agenda. What we had remaining on there, I got to look at Omar's thing that he actually will pull up what he posted in the group. Give me one moment, because he had the last language. And this he has his little sheet here too I could use. All right, 1 second. All right, I'm going to share this other screen, see if I can understand what he had here. New share. Okay, this is Omar's agenda that he had posted. Who did that? I didn't do that with the pink, I swear. Somebody did that, not me. Okay, Omar's trying to get back in. Omar. You've got a microphone now on your. Here we go.
Oh my goodness.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a proposed amendment to the first proposal under old business. Could I be recognized in the queue when we get to that?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Omar, did you want to redo attendance to your own liking? I took attendance in your absence, but if not, we're going to carry on.
Yeah, so that where we're at right now, attendance?
No, we passed that and we're further in the agenda, but I don't want to mess up your record keeping. I just did attendance orally on the recording, but we haven't started any debate yet. If you want to retake attendance so it's to your liking, this is your opportunity.
Okay. Do you want to switch screens? Because I'm all set up.
Sure, let me stop my share. Okay, I stopped my share.
All right. Here we go. You see? Are we good on my end, Karen? You guys see?
I can hear you.
Yep, I see it.
Okay. All right, so we'll skip roll call because you already did that, you said, right?
Well, if you want to do it to your liking so you have your records, feel free because we have not started debate yet.
Okay. Matt Choco.
Here.
Laura Epke.
Here.
Richard Fast.
Here.
Jim Fulner.
I'm here.
He's here?
Yes.
Okay. Helen Gilson.
She's here.
She's here?
Yes.
Okay. Paul Grindle.
Not here.
Duke Van Horn.
Here.
Thomas Knapp. Should
Here.
be here. Kat Martin, I saw. Josh McHose. I'm going to go through this quick. Randy McGlenn.
Not here.
Al Meckley.
Here.
Okay. Bennett Morse.
Not here.
Daryl Perry.
I'm here.
Omar Crowe is present. Roger Roots, I see.
Right here.
Brian Slawinski.
Not here.
Aaron Starr.
Alicia's here in his place.
Yeah. And Curry Taylor, I see.
Here.
Okay. Let's do the, here we go. Jeffrey Adams. We're doing the alternates now. Jim Cavoli. Fred Cole. Spencer Diaz. Tiffany Diaz de Leon. Richard Longstreth.
He's here.
Here.
He is here. Okay. Alicia's here. Betty Rose Ryan.
None of the other alternates are present, including the second alternates.
That saves me a lot of trouble. Thank you.
Okay, because we went through it. All right, thank you so much. So we are now back to the leftover business from our last meeting, which is 2 competing proposals. The first one, if you can, I can't really see, there you go, thank you so much. This is to amend omissions, the part of omissions we did not touch. So only the sentence we're dealing with is on the screen. The primary amendment is to add the phrase, including the necessity of any governmental system, so that it would read, our silence about any other particular government law, regulation, ordinance, directive, edict, control, regulatory agency, activity, or machination, including the necessity of any governmental system, should not be construed to imply approval. And then there is a substitute motion. Is that further on down the screen?
If I could state a point of information, the substitute motion, which is right here, that was the last thing we voted on.
Oh, we did. So we're back on the primary. Thank you.
Yeah, we're only on the primary. Yeah.
Thank you.
That was amended.
I was trying to jiggle my noggin on that one. Awesome.
Yeah.
So we are now just dealing with this without any substitute. So we're opening up for debate on that particular amendment. Mr. Fast asked to be in line first, and then I have Mr. Perry. Mr. Fast.
Okay, so what I would like to say is I think what I want to do is propose a substitute amendment. What I would like to do is I would like to strike the proposed language and replace it with, quote, or even the existence of government itself, end quote.
Okay, and I do think the best way to do this is, again, as a substitute motion. So we have our 2 competing items again.
Or even the
Existence of government itself.
That was a very similar thing that we voted down last time.
No, I don't believe it was, because the language that really explicitly dealt with this type of language was all in the primary.
Primary, that's right. You're right.
Yeah. All right. Mr. Perry?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if we actually approved the agenda or not, but I would like to actually propose time limits on agenda items. Would that be currently in order to do?
It would be, because I did not give the committee opportunity to approve or amend the agenda, and I did promise at a past meeting that if someone wanted to challenge me, on the issue of time limits, that I would in fact afford that opportunity. So you're raising a point of order, I suppose, that I did not give the committee opportunity to approve the agenda, and I'll say your point of order is well taken. Now, as to your motion to amend the agenda to include time limits, will you state your exact motion?
Yes. Item number 1, which is any remaining items from the 4-2 agenda, I would like that to be 40 minutes. Item number 2, which is a new plank regarding corporations, let's set that for 1 hour.
Okay, and is that the extent of your motion?
Yes.
Okay, and as I forewarned, I'm ruling that motion out of order. I believe it goes against the intent and spirit of Roberts, in which you are not allowed to make motions to limit debate in committees. And adding timeframes to an agenda item is de facto moving to limit debate. So I do believe that is out of order. Only the parent committee can put in orders to limit debate. We do not have that authority. Would you like to appeal the ruling of the chair, Mr. Perry?
Yes, I would.
Okay, would you like to speak to your appeal? And while you're doing that, I'm going to be getting the reference out of Roberts, unless Richard wants to do that for me quickly.
Yeah, I'll speak to this. There was an episode of your The Cult of Ronner podcast where you and your co-host were discussing this, and you mentioned that one of the authors of what I believe to be the worst book ever written, Robert's Rules of Order, one of the authors actually says that giving time limits is something that is allowed, or at least according to Miss Matson, and I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I do believe that's what she said a few meetings ago. I also have issues with the party placing a document that we do not control as this high exalted governing document and considering it sacred text. So I would like the committee to overrule your ruling, and if you are of the belief that we can't place any limits on anything, then we should not have an end time for the meeting, and meetings should go on indefinitely until everybody dies of exhaustion.
Okay, I still have not found that reference, so I will
Pat
wing it.
Martin chatted page 500.
Okay, thank you. My eyes are doing very poorly today. I cannot wait for the large print. Okay, here we go. Thank you so much, Ms. Martin. I did not hear from the author myself. That, again, was relayed through Ms. Matson. So I don't know exactly how the question was posed. But in any event, there are multiple authors, and it's not explicitly addressed. But what is explicitly addressed, it says, in order that there be no interference with the Assembly's having the benefit of its committee's matured judgment, motions to close or limit debate are not allowed in committees. Adding time limits is de facto a motion to limit debate, and it's not allowed. If the body, meaning the delegates at convention, wanted to overrule this in Roberts, they have every opportunity to do that by amending either the convention standing rules or the bylaws, and they haven't. So this is not putting Roberts over us, because we could always make things in our bylaws or standing rules that overrule Roberts, and the delegates have not chosen to do so, and our judgment should not be put in place of the delegates and our governing documents. All right, anyone else who would like to speak in debate, and I will reserve my right to speak last depending upon what's said in debate. Anyone?
This is Omar. Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Riccio?
So, well, Madam Chair, you know how much I appreciate Roberts, and how much I appreciate your admiration to stick to the wording of it. We need more of that in the Libertarian Party, in my opinion. If we do this, we'd be setting a precedent for the rest of the term of the committee. And who would set time limits going forward on the agendas? Would it be the committee that does it, or you when you set
I'm
the agenda?
assuming you're asking a point of information. I would set it, and then the committee would have the right to amend it at the beginning. And one other thing I want to add, just for everyone, please know that overturning is not taken personally. So please don't think that it is, if that is in fact what you wish to do. I just want to let you know I won't get butthurt or anything like that. Ms. Mattson, then I have Ms. Gilson and Mr. Knapp.
Madam
Oh,
Chair?
I'm sorry. Oh, I stepped on you, didn't I? Go ahead. And then I have Ms. Mattson, Ms. Gilson,
No,
and
it's
Mr.
okay.
Knapp.
It's okay. You're answering it was kind of a point of information. So my next question, which also might be a point of information, would be then, if we do that, as you stated, how does that affect the scope of notice? Thank you.
It doesn't affect the scope of notice of future agendas. Notice, it doesn't, because it doesn't change the subject matter. So it doesn't go beyond the scope of notice. You can always do less than is said in the notice. You just can't go beyond it in a way that's not reasonably subsumed within the items that are contained in the notice. Ms. Mattson.
So I've spoken on this before. I just want to confirm that Mr. Perry's recollection is correct, that I did say that in a prior meeting. And this is a question I've wrestled with previously when chairing the platform committee, because it seems to go against the spirit of some things that are set out. However, due to Mr. Balch's endorsement of it as being the only mechanism for committees to control their timing, given the other restrictions placed on them, I've come down on the side of allowing it. And I wouldn't vote in favor of unreasonable time limits, within 5 minutes, where it's just basically gabbling things through. But I think the ones being proposed by Mr. Perry are fairly reasonable. And, the motion to limit debate, is to apply to one particular thing that's in front of you right now. And we're talking about saying, applying in a broader sense that all motions, not just, oh, this one that I really want to get through, I'm setting a rule for this one. So based on Mr. Balch's endorsement of it, I've accepted it as an option in committees. It is one of the things that I submitted to the authorship team of Robert's Rules for them to consider clarifying in the 12th edition. I hope they will. I have no idea if they will, but anyway, I hope so.
Thank you, Ms. Mattson. Ms. Gilson?
Hi, I just wanted to point out that setting a time expected to be needed for a topic in an agenda does not limit the discussion for that topic. If you come up to the end of the time that you've set in your agenda, someone can move to extend if you need it for more discussion, but it helps to set structure so that you get through all of the things that you have in your agenda. And for people that are free spirits and believe in freedom, I find it ironic that we create such a situation where we're slaves to Robert's Rules. And I think that having time set on your agenda is just good common sense.
Mr. Knapp?
Yeah.
And then Mr. Roots. Sorry.
I'm not going to get into the weeds on parliamentary procedure, but as a practical matter, this session we've spent less time arguing about whether or not to extend time after setting time limits. We've actually been doing things. Last platform committee, yeah, we would spend 45 minutes arguing over whether to extend time for 5 minutes. So to me, not setting time limits, just having an agenda makes a lot more sense from a time standpoint.
Okay, Mr. Roots?
Well, I can see both sides. I can see the argument for time limits. However, I think time limits could actually empower almost anyone to well, they would empower some people and disempower others. Someone who wanted to prevent a motion from being passed could just use up the time, maybe do some amendment motions, and then that's the end of the time. And so you could almost kill any motion just by manipulating that time period. So I'm against it, I guess. I'd have to still oppose it.
All right, if there is no further debate, I will take my opportunity. Okay, Mr. Ricuro?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would say to some of the points that were raised, keep something in mind when it comes to Roberts and procedure. There's a little bit of common sense that's involved in it, and that's why it's important to have a good chair. We elected a good chair, and we should trust in her to prevent anyone from filibustering the meeting or doing anything else that they would that any other parliamentary trick to try and ramrod the committee in the wrong way. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else, or I will be exercising my right to speak last? Okay, there are some points I do wish to address. I neglected to address Mr. Perry's point of, well, then the meeting should be able to last forever. No, that would violate the issue of notice, which is completely different than limiting debate. I have to say that the reason I made the ruling as I did is I'm absolutely convinced it goes against the spirit of Roberts, not because of any particular opinion on time limits or not. And I would be derelict of my duty if I did not rule in this matter and succumb to personal preference. I believe the points raised that one very talkative person could filibuster with time limits is in fact the case. And we do end up spending more time arguing about time limits. And in my opinion, we have come up with much better proposals in the meetings in which we did not have time limits. And as far as people dragging it on too long, if somebody were doing that, I would say, I have gently told the committee before, please stop repeating points. And I didn't have to rule anyone out of order, and everyone, I think, understood what I was saying. So that's all I have to say on that matter. So we will proceed to a vote. Pay it close attention here because appeals are a little bit different. You're not voting whether or not to overturn, you're voting whether or not to sustain. So a yes vote means you are sustaining my ruling and that we will proceed without time limits. A no vote means you do not wish to sustain my ruling, meaning you wish to overturn my ruling, at which point we will go to a vote on Mr. Perry's motion to add those time limits. Is everyone clear on what a yes or no vote means in this circumstance? It's a bit confusing. All right, Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready.
Okay, here we go. Matt Choco?
I'm going to abstain.
Laura Evke?
Yes.
Richard Fass?
Pass.
Jim Fulner? He's not here, right?
He was.
Oh, no, he is. He's on mute. I see him.
Sorry, I vote yes to sustain.
Helen Gilson?
Nay.
Oh, Grindel's not here. Duke Van Horn?
No.
Thomas Knapp?
Yes.
Cat Martin?
Pass.
Josh McHose?
He's not here.
Not here, right? Randy McGlenn, not here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Al Meckley?
Yes.
Daryl Perry?
No.
Omar Crow votes no to overturn or to sustain.
No. Okay, are you
No
on
to sustain the ruling. No to sustain the ruling.
So you wish to overturn?
Yes.
Okay, wanted to make sure you knew what you were doing because it gets crazy.
Yes. Roger Roots.
Yes.
Brian Slawinski,
Not here.
Alicia Matson,
I vote no.
Curry Taylor,
I'll uphold. Yay.
Okay, we're going to come back now to Mr. Fast
Abstain.
and
Miss Martin.
Miss Martin.
No.
Okay, did I miss anyone?
You
Madam
missed the
Chair, Madam Chair, I show 6 to 6.
Okay, it requires a majority to overturn. I do not need to vote. I would vote yes, but I don't need to, so it fails and we are going to proceed without time limits. Thank you very much for your very measured consideration, committee. All right, we are back to the omissions plank. We have the primary amendment, which adds including the necessity of any governmental system. We have the substitute amendment, which is including the existence of government itself. You could amend, debate either of them. When there is no further debate, we're going to vote which one shall be the primary amendment. We've done an awful lot of debate on this issue. So I ask everyone to try to recall what was said before and to keep comments to new items, because this has spanned 3 meetings now, and I think most things have been said. Mr. Roots.
Yeah, now that I'm remembering, this new proposal, which I guess is going to be a substitute, it has the word existence of government in it. And remember, last time we debated quite a bit, and we ultimately decided the word necessity of government is better than existence of government. And anyway, that's my point. I oppose the substitute.
Madam Chair,
Who's speaking?
Richard Fast.
Yes, Mr. Fast?
Okay, so 2 things. The first is I did want to speak to my substitute motion, because I think that anytime somebody introduces a motion, whether it's substitute or otherwise, should have a chance to at least speak to the rationale.
Certainly.
But, you know, to not waste people's time, if in the last meeting the consensus of the committee was that the necessity is better than existence, I would be willing to entertain the substituting the word existence for necessity to make it read, or even the necessity of government itself.
Is there any objection to, since Mr. Fast was just informed that this was in fact debated, for us changing the word existence in the substitute to necessity without a vote? Is there any objection to this? Seeing none, it will be, or even this necessity of government itself.
Madam Chair?
Yes?
Could I now speak to my amended substitute motion?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the prevailing philosophies in articulating libertarian principles in the platform is to remain agnostic as to whether the state should exist, and now including necessity. This language does not call for the end of government. What it does is it recognizes that libertarians are a very broad spectrum of people with different views on the size, scope, and necessity of government. So I encourage the committee to support this substitute motion because it looks at the bigger picture, quote, government itself, as opposed to the main motion, which only deals with, quote, particular governmental systems. So the substitute motion is more all-encompassing, and I ask that you vote in favor.
Thank you. Is there any further debate on either of these? Ms. Matson?
So I think this phrase is being proposed to add here is different from the other clauses in this plank. You know, the other clauses are broad categories, and it says just because we didn't say anything about this a specific subject that falls into this broad category, don't assume anything. But this phrase is different. This is a very specific question, And by putting it here, followed by the phrase should not be construed to imply approval, kind of implies the anarchist position, more so than the broad categories that are the other items in the comma-separated list. I think it's very, very different meaning that's being added here by this phrase as opposed to the other ones, because this is a specific question, not a broad category that could cover a lot of topics that are not in our platform.
Thank you, Ms. Matson. Is there any other debate on these items? Mr. Roots?
Yeah, I think the change of the word to the word necessity has changed my mind. I now support the substitute. I think it's very well written now, and I appreciate what Mr. Fast is doing.
Because Mr. Fast wasn't here when I brought the committee's attention to this last meeting, just making sure everyone is aware of their rights. If one of these is passed through committee, those who preferred the other language would have an opportunity for a minority report. If neither of them passes, there's no opportunity for minority report. So I just want everyone to strategically know their rights. Is there any further debate, or can we move to a vote as to whether this substitute language shall become the primary motion? A yes vote would make it the primary motion, a no vote would dispense with it, and the former language would be the primary motion. Mr. Knapp?
Aren't we voting on whether to accept an amendment to the substitute?
I asked if there was an objection, and nobody objected.
You asked if there was an objection to changing existence to necessity, not to an objection to adopting the amendment.
We didn't adopt he proposed an amendment. I hear you. Well, he did it as a substitute, though.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
When I changed the word existence to necessity, the way that I was thinking about this is that this was a friendly amendment in which the previous speaker, who said that the consensus of the committee was that the necessity would be more appropriate than existence, I took that as a friendly amendment to my substitute motion.
Okay,
right. I misinterpreted what was going on. I was wrong. I thought that we were considering an amendment to the substitute when in fact we're considering a substitute.
Correct. Correct. And Mr. Fast, the committee agreed without objection to make that change, but just FYI, there is no such thing as a friendly amendment.
Oh, okay. What I had in mind was that the previous speaker.
It's done, though. It's done. There's really, it's done. Okay. So we don't need to rehash what happened. Mr. Perry.
Just for clarification, when we're about to vote, what are the two things that we are voting? I know we're voting on whether the substitute becomes the main motion, but where's the wording of the main motion?
It is right above it. Instead of that phrase, which is in the substitute, if you could blue the phrase, Mr. Secretary, because it's just a big black block and people can't see where the changed language is. It is including the necessity of any particular governmental system.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I'd like to speak for the primary, I guess, if that's in order.
Yes.
Okay, so I like the phrase governmental system, and here's the reason why. When I think of government, I don't think of just one thing. There's many, many different types of government. There's many different levels. UN, world government, federal, state, local, HOA, if you want to throw that in there. And the primary phrasing, in my mind, it encompasses certain levels of government and specific and particular levels, maybe 3 out of the 5, maybe 4 out of the 5, maybe all of the 5. or whatever, all some part of the total. But if you use that phrase, it's easier to argue that, well, maybe we don't like the local governments, let's get rid of those, but we like the federal government, or vice versa. So you can make that argument. So I think it's a little bit more diverse, more powerful language.
Thank you, Mr.
Madam-
Taylor. Yes, Mr. Fast?
Okay, so two things. The first is I respectfully disagree with Ms. Matson's interpretation. I do think that the inclusion, this question, as she put it, the necessity of government itself, I think that this is very appropriate in the omissions plank because, when we're talking about anything that government does and even government's own existence, this all has to do with the operation and existence of government. For government to operate, it has to first exist. So I think it's very appropriate to have this in the omissions plank. And this ties into the previous speaker that, yes, there are libertarians who it's like, well, we prefer the local government, but we're not fans of the state or federal government or any other order. Yes, that is true. And yes, the original motion does speak to that. However, I feel that the substitute motion is more appropriate because it covers a broader span of libertarians. I think that the main motion would speak to those who favor one level of government over the other as far as preferences go, whereas the substitute motion is more broad-based. It encompasses libertarians who, for one reason or another, reject all levels of government at all. And so what you have is the substitute motion covers more people. It covers a broader spectrum of libertarians. The main motion does not do that. So I think if we want to be, more big tent, if we want to include more people, the substitute motion is more appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Fast. Okay, if there is no further debate, I'm giving it a second. Okay, we are going to move to a vote. And what we are voting on is whether or not the substitute motion shall become the primary motion. You all should be pros at substitutes by now, because we've done a lot of them. So is there any questions about what we are voting on? A yes vote will make the substitute the primary motion and the primary goes away. A no vote keeps the primary and the substitute goes away. Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
Okay, Matt Choco.
No.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fast.
Yes.
Jim Follner.
Yes.
Helen Gilson.
Yes.
Duke Van Horn.
No.
Thomas Knapp.
Yes.
Cat Martin.
No.
Randy, no. Al Meckley.
No.
Daryl Perry.
Yes.
Omar Crow votes nay. Roger Roots.
Yes.
Alicia Matson.
I vote no.
Curry Taylor.
No.
And do we skip anyone? Madam Chair, I show 6 yay, 8 nay.
Yes,
No
it
express
fails.
abstentions.
Yep, that is what I have, so that fails. So the substitute is eliminated. We are back to the primary motion. And where we're at is there can be further debate or amendment. And if there is neither, we shall proceed to a vote on whether or not to adopt the primary motion as the recommendation of the committee. So is there any
Madam
further?
Chair?
Mr. Fast.
Point of information, just to clarify, is suppose that the main motion does pass in this committee, would the substitute motion still be appropriate could be included as a minority report?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, is there any further debate or amendment?
Zelmar.
Yes?
So thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to remind everyone that at the last meeting we adopted, this was additional language. We adopted language that I'd have to find right now, to be honest with you.
It
In
was
regards to
adding
this,
the sentence about the non-initiation of force at the very
yes,
beginning.
and then we did it at the beginning. So I encourage everyone to look at the minutes for the last meeting. I find that to be, I hope I'm not out of order here, but I found that language to be the strongest language so far, and I was not in support of any of these additional motions, and I'm still not in support of this current wording as it is. Thank you.
I am going to take one opportunity to speak and reiterate what I had said last time. The analogy I had given was to the gender identity plank, that there are certain constituents in our party that have felt either left out or bludgeoned by the current platform in their experiences in the party. This language has been brought forward because a significant minority in the party feel that way. And while this may not be particularly personal to anyone else, anyone in this committee, just like the gender identity plank didn't directly affect me as I am a cis woman, I realized it was important to a certain segment of the party, and I agree with them. I ask that this be evaluated in that light. I am one of the people that this sort of language, either of the wordings would have been fine with me, is very important to. And that's all I really have to say there. If there's no further debate or amendment, okay, Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
Okay, let me just get to the right screen here. And Matt Choco.
Yes.
Laura Epke.
Yes.
Richard Fass.
Yes.
Jim Foner.
Yes.
That was an A?
It was
I
a
vote
yes.
yes.
Okay. Helen Gilson.
Yes.
Paul Grindle.
He's not here.
No. Duke Van Horn.
Yes.
Thomas Knapp.
Yes.
Cat Martin.
Yes.
Al Meckley.
Yes.
Dale Perry.
Daryl and both of his cats vote in favor.
Omar Crow votes nay. Roger Roots.
Yes.
Alicia Matson.
I vote no.
Curry Taylor.
Yes.
Did I miss anyone? Madam Chair, I show 12, 2, no express abstentions.
Okay, that's also what I have, so that passes out of committee. Yay, we're out of omissions. We're going to the next item on the agenda, which I believe is the corporatism plank. If you could scroll down whenever you get a chance.
Actually, we have still to dispose of the amendment that was proposed to
What's
do
the
space exploration.
Oh, space exploration was next? Okay.
Yes.
I was taking Mr. Perry's word for it on the time limits, so we would still not have had time limits on space exploration, but okay, we will deal then with the space exploration plank. Let's see here. All right, we had already passed via email vote the sentence, "We oppose all government restrictions upon voluntary, peaceful use of outer space." That is already a recommendation of the committee. What is being proposed is to add to that plank as follows. "We oppose all government attempts to make outer space a personal club for the privileged only nations and openly call upon all governments to make outer space free for peoples of all nations to explore space at their own expense and leisure and aim to keep its various wonders free from tribalism, nationalism, and other forms of human living discriminating factors and confine those sad factors to terra firma, parentheses, earth alone. Mr. Fulner.
Before I speak, let me make sure I understand. Are we speaking
You cut out. I didn't
on
hear
this
you.
wording or on whether or not to reconsider this item?
I don't consider it a
Is the-
reconsideration to add additional language.
Okay. So I recommend voting against this. I have nothing particularly against the suggestion, but I think it's less likely to be adopted with the additional wording there. If there are members of this committee who want the additional wording, I think this fits better as a minority report than as the platform committee's report. Thank you.
Mr. Cholko, and then I'll add myself to the queue.
Yeah, I would just say that's an incredibly long sentence there. It just sounds weird. And though I think I generally agree with the spirit of it, I don't feel like it fits with the general style of our platform. And I agree with Mr. Fulner that I think it makes it less likely that this thing would make it into the platform. So I'd also agree with Mr. Fulner that it would be better as a minority report if there are people that really want this language or something similar in there. So I'll be voting no.
Madam Chair.
Who was that, please?
Richard Fast, I'd like to be added to the queue.
Okay, I will add you afterwards. And Mr. Fulner, did you intend to keep your hand up? No. Okay, then Mr. Secretary. So I have myself, Fast, and then the Secretary.
I will also speak if I can.
And then Mr. Roots. I'm going to not echo word for word, just say that I do agree with the speakers before me. I would encourage those who support additional language to really take a look at this wording. I can tell you when I read it, and I'm a very literate person, I stumbled over it. It's mouthful. While I agree with the sentiment, if it comes down to a tie vote, I would not be voting for this as the committee report. I think it will absolutely jettison any chance of getting that first sentence passed, and it belongs as a minority report, and it needs to be cleaned up, in my opinion. The word space is repeated so many times I was getting dizzy. Mr. Mercurio and Mr. Roots.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to echo a little bit about what Mr. Fulner said. However, while I share some of his concerns, and I'm not rising in support of this, I try personally, and again, this is free advice, take it as you will, not to project too much, because I know it's easy for us to say, oh, this is not going to pass, no way this would ever pass. I tend to err on the side of good ideas don't require force, so a good idea is just going to hit you. I mean, I think there have been previous platform committees, and there have been even things that we've talked about that just hit us, like the gender plank. That was a no-brainer to support that. Even though the wording, we wanted some of the wording and the structure to be a little different. I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer to support that. So I don't want us to go too far ahead into the future. I'd like for us not to do that. If we feel like as a committee that something is really strong and we vote really strong on it, and then the delegates voted down, they voted down. But I think we need to do the best job that we can as a committee to put the best proposals forward. With that being said, this is not one of those. Thank you.
Mr. Roots?
I'll just say I don't like the wording that says we openly call upon governments to make outer space free. That's sort of, it violates the sort of natural rights theory, the foundations that we don't call upon government to give us our freedom. So I don't like that phrase at all. And also down below, there's this wording such as tribalism. I don't even know how we would define that. Are we really against tribalism? Probably yes, but anyway, I just don't, I agree with what the chair and others have said. The language is not perfect.
Okay, Mr. Fulner, and I think I heard Mr. Fast. Mr. Fulner?
Yeah, I just take a motion to table this until Mr. McHose, or for this particular meeting. Mr. McHose was the one who proposed this wording, and I'm not sure if I'm comfortable voting on this until I hear his argument.
So you are, here's the problem. We do not know when Mr. McHose is going to
Correct.
be.
So I would table this to the next meeting, and then so this would be if my tabling passes, we take it forward to the next meeting, and if he's here, we vote on it. If not, we either vote on it without him or we do this again.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that
Yep.
that was clear. All right, we have a motion to postpone until, I believe our next meeting is April 11th. This is debatable. Would anyone like to, and Mr. Fulner, feel free to speak to it if you'd like. And Mr. Knapp will come after you.
Yeah, I think I already gave my reasoning.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp, and then Mr. Secretary.
I support postponing to the next meeting because I would like to hear from Mr. McHose, and then possibly between now and then, he and others could get the language cleaned up and move that as an amendment once we take the matter back up.
Okay, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Normally under normal circumstances or different circumstances, I would support this, but you put out notice and you gave instructions on how all these things work and proposals and whatnot, and so I don't mean to sound negative. I believe we're all here right now. Mr. McHose, I want to say he had ample time to be here to speak to this. And as it was explained to me, that when we have, when we're doing the email ballots, the person that proposes it doesn't own it anymore. It's owned by the committee. So this is owned. I'm kind of approaching this mentality that this language is kind of owned by the committee and we should dispose of it, yea or nay, right now. Thank you.
You're welcome, and I would like to speak briefly. Just Mr. McHose received no co-sponsors on the list. This was brought forth on the list where anyone could have asked his intention or proposed amendments, and the committee chose not to. It's on the agenda because I believe in everything being heard. I sponsored it to get on the agenda because I can do that unilaterally, but it seems surprising to me. If it comes down to a tie vote, I would vote against postponing because there has been more than sufficient time and no one in the committee asked Mr. Hose questions about it any further on the list, nor co-sponsored this motion. Is there any further debate on the motion to postpone? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
Yes. All right. Matt Choco.
No.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fass.
Pass.
Jim Fulner.
Yes.
Helen Gilson.
I just want to be clear, voting no on the postponement.
A yes would postpone it if the yeses have it, and a no would have us continue on.
Vote no.
Paul Grindle. No. Duke Reinhorn.
No.
Thomas Knapp.
Yes.
Cat Martin.
No.
Al Meckley.
No.
Dale Perry.
No.
Omar Crowe votes nay. Roger Roots.
Yes.
Alicia Matson.
No,
That was a nay.
that was a no. Yes. I mean, correct.
Corey Taylor.
No.
Okay. Now, I'm going to see here. I think someone passed. Mr. Fast passed.
I vote no.
Okay. Madam Chair, I showed 3 ayes, 11 nays, no express abstentions.
Yep, that's also what I have. So the motion to postpone fails. We are back to debate or amendment on the main motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Fast?
I'd like to speak against the proposal. Would that be in order?
Yes.
Okay, so I like forward-looking proposals, and this is a forward-looking proposal in the sense of anticipating what is to come, different possibilities, libertarian perspectives on, what the future could hold and what we would like the future to look like. So I like the spirit of this proposal, but I'm against it because while I appreciate the ideas, there could definitely be better wording. I see a lot of ideas jumbled together, and I'd like to have the run-on sentences split into smaller chunks and improve the wording. So I will be voting no on this proposal.
All right. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Secretary, we are ready for a vote.
Okay, let me get to Matt Choco.
No.
Laura Epke.
No.
Richard Fass.
No.
Jim Polner.
No.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Duke Van Horn. Mr. Van Horn. Not hearing anything. I see him. Tom Snap.
Abstain.
Cat Martin.
No.
Al Meckley.
No.
Dale Perry.
No.
Omar Crow votes no. Roger Roots.
No.
Alicia Matson.
Vote no.
Curry Taylor.
No.
And I show 12 nay, 1 express abstention, Madam Chair.
Okay, so that passes, and we are now
Point
on,
of order.
yes.
I believe you mean that failed.
I mean, it fails, excuse me.
There you go.
That fails. So now we are on the, it doesn't have a name at this point, but it is the one that was originally called corporatism. So we have some language, and if the language passes, the placement and the name of it can be decided by the committee. Here is the language as presently proposed. Corporate entities are not people and possess no rights distinct. I think they're supposed to be distinct with no LE, but distinctly, we can clean up the grammar, from the individuals within them. Individuals who form corporations neither gain nor lose any right they had previous to incorporation and are liable for their acts of willful negligence and fraud. Okay, the floor is open for debate and amendment.
Madam Chair.
Okay, I have Mr. Taylor, then Mr. Fast, then Mr. Fulner. Mr. Taylor.
Yes, I'll speak. This one is, the way it reads right now, it is something that I technically agree with. However, I wonder if someone reading this might get confused as to how the Libertarian Party views businesses in general. And for example, suppose, let's say you don't use the word corporate or corporation in there, and you replace that term with large business, or even let's say you replace that term with small business, and you read it out. Small businesses are not people and possess no rights distinctly from theirs. So then what would be the purpose of that statement? I mean, so I guess what I'm trying to get at is, what is the purpose of the phrasing supposed to be? What problem is it trying to solve that's different than what you would try to solve if you were just speaking to a small business or as a large business? Because the one thing I don't want the Libertarian Party to come off as is anti-big business or anti small business or anti-business at all. So I kind of want to ask, what are the things that this plank is trying to do to specifically say, we don't like this that's happening, the government is doing? It's kind of just a general question.
Okay, I have Mr. Fast, then Mr. Fulner, Mr. Knapp, and Ms. Martin.
I'll
Mr. Fast.
speak on this.
And then Mr. Roots after Ms. Martin. Okay, Mr. Fast.
Okay, so I like and I agree with the first sentence, but I'd be interested in hearing from the proposal sponsors their intent in the second sentence. The two sentences, I feel like the first sentence, it's like, okay, yes, I agree with that, but then I'm lost. I'm lost in the second sentence because I feel like there's, like, as the previous speaker said, there's a problem. This proposal is to address that problem, but I'm not clear on what the problem is. And so I just would like to hear from the sponsors what they had in mind specifically with the second sentence. I don't necessarily disagree with it, but it just seems different after the first sentence.
Mr. Fulner, who is the sponsor, so you have your wish. Mr. Fulner.
Yep, so I was the original proposer of this, so I hope to be able to address a couple of your concerns here. So first, to address the initial problem as I saw it, which led to this proposal, many voters I spoke with when I ran for office, when they hear myself and other candidates speaking against government doing these various things, the often gut response is they fear that we want corporations having all the power that currently belongs to government. And that's often, to many, even more fearful than government is, because corporations are not elected. They appear to many as though they have no checks and balances at all. Of course, we understand as libertarians that the market is the ultimate check and balance here. And of course, there's also this idea that's happened over the last decade or so of corporations spending their money to push public policy in one direction or another, as if they had the same rights that individuals do. But corporations never die, or rarely, and individuals do. There's limits on individual giving and what have you, which again is not necessarily in line with libertarian perspective, but corporations shouldn't be given more rights as a collective than any other collective does, whether it's as a party, as a tea club, as a union, what have you. So I was trying to address that idea that we acknowledge corporations exist and that they are made up, they aren't some big spooky man somewhere. They're made up of individuals, and those individuals within the corporation still have their own rights and their own responsibilities. And grouping together with others to form a corporation should not automatically increase their rights nor decrease their responsibility, or the other way around. So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. If that's not clear from the wording, I'd love to hear some amendment proposals which may address that better.
All right, I have up next Mr. Knapp. Ms. Martin withdrew her name from the queue. Mr. Roots, then Mr. Cholko. Mr. Knapp.
Yes, I would say that the problem is limited liability. That is an artificial grant of state privilege that nobody else gets except these special organizations that get a charter from government that say you aren't responsible for what you do beyond the assets invested in yourself. That is clearly against any libertarian principle, and we should have it in our platform.
All right, Mr. Roots, and then Mr. Cholko. Mr. Roots.
Okay, I oppose this very strongly. I believe that it conflicts with another plank, and that plank is 2.7. I'm sorry, 2.8. Marketplace freedom. Libertarians support free markets. We defend the right of individuals to form corporations, cooperatives, and other types of entities based on voluntary association. So we have a plank that says we support corporations, we support the right of corporations. I just want to say that the corporate form is one of the most wonderful libertarian things ever devised for poor people to pool their resources and compete in the marketplace against wealthy interests, powerful interests. If you eliminate corporations and the corporate form, you actually greatly empower the state and you empower the wealthy. Most of us are too poor. We'll never own a newspaper. We'll never own a TV station, a radio station. But through the wonder of corporations and the corporate form, we can pool our resources with others and actually compete with the state. We can compete with powerful interests. I defend corporations a lot, and actually, this is lefty stuff. This proposal is lefty stuff, and it's mushy, and it really doesn't. Several of you have already asked the question. Well, what is this designed to fix? This statement that we oppose corporations being people. That's one of those things that's thrown out by the left in the wake of the Citizens United decision back in 2010, and frequently they falsely suggest that there's some source of law. Maybe the Supreme Court in the Citizens United decision might have said that corporations are people. If you look at that decision, that is not said in that decision. Nowhere in any source of law, not a Supreme Court decision, not any statute, does it say corporations are people with all the rights of people. However, corporations, just like partnerships, just like associations, just like your Wednesday night poker game, can be a legal person in a proper case. All of us are created. By the way, the Libertarian Party is both a corporation and a legal person in a proper case. And so this is just mushy lefty stuff. It does not belong in the Libertarian Party platform at all. It actually conflicts with the other parts of the platform. I strongly think that all libertarians should recognize that the corporate form is a great wonder, and it's a great tool for libertarians against the state and against powerful wealthy interests. And this is just lefty mushy proposal. It needs to die a quiet death. I probably agree with the proposer. By the way, the thing that I oppose is that corporate charters are in state-held offices. Now that's the problem. We could propose something like that, and I would agree with it. That the government should not control the corporate charters. But that's a separate thing. This proposal is just mushy left-wing kind of language that it doesn't solve any libertarian problem.
Madam Chair.
Okay, I'll put you in line. I have Mr. Cholko, Mr. Fulmo, Mr. Perry, and then Mr. Fast. Mr. Cholko?
Okay, I'm going to propose an amendment. I'm going to put it in chat right now. It's going to add the words, "we believe that," at the beginning of the first sentence. Drop the ly off of distinctly, and then change the second sentence to read, "individuals who form corporations must be liable for their acts of willful negligence and fraud."
Okay, let me read that aloud. Let me see here. So, I'm just
Point
looking.
of order.
Yes, Miss Martin.
Are you able to add something to the first sentence as well as the second sentence in the same amendment?
He didn't add anything.
He adjusted the second sentence, though. That's the question. Are you able to adjust both in
Yes.
one? Okay.
It's one proposal. Okay. Yeah, I'm just considering whether this is a substitute or an amendment, and it's an amendment. It's a complicated amendment, but it's an amendment.
Madam Chair, a point of information.
Yes, Mr. Fast.
Okay, I was going to propose a separate amendment my proposal requires that the original proposal stay the same. So if we adopt this new amendment, would my subsequent proposal be null and void at that point?
It would be.
Okay.
All right, now I had in the queue, unless Mr. Toko wishes to speak further, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I just like to say, I think the "we believe that" is helpful in that it makes it better fit with the style of most of our other planks. And I think that the second sentence, the words I eliminated from the second sentence are kind of repetitive. We basically say the same thing in the first sentence. So I think it cleans up the language a little bit.
Okay, I had on deck Mr. Fulmer, Mr. Perry, and Mr. Fast. Do you wish to remain while we're speaking on the amendment, which is pretty close to the original, so I assume you do. Mr. Fulmer?
Yeah, I had no intention of raising my hand to begin with. That was an error.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perry?
Yeah, so I'll speak in favor of actually either the amendment or the original proposal here and say that I don't see how it could be construed that this proposed plank somehow contradicts with plank 2.8, which says we defend the rights of individuals to form corporations, cooperatives, and other types of entities based on voluntary association. All this is saying is that they are not, people. Yes, they are a legal person. That way, everybody that owns, a single share of Walmart doesn't have to sign every paycheck. That would be, ridiculous and cumbersome. But what this says is that the members of the corporation, or, if you want to even look at 2.8, the cooperative, or other types of entities based on voluntary association, which could be your local poker club, don't have any further rights than the individuals that make up the group. And also that the individuals who form those groups must be liable for acts of willful negligence and fraud. So if, all of us get together and create the Photon Blaster 3000, and then, it winds up just killing everybody, and we knew that it was going to kill everybody, but we said, nope, this is only going to blast photons. There's no negative consequences at all. We should be liable for what we did. We shouldn't be able to hide behind some sort of shield of, nope, here's this government piece of paper that says we're not responsible. And I thought that libertarians believed in individual responsibility, so I will support either the amendment or the original proposal, whichever one actually comes up for a vote.
Okay, Mr. Fast, and then I'm adding myself to the queue.
Okay, so the proposed amendment that I was going to submit was to add, quote, at the end of the second sentence, after the word fraud, insert a comma and the words, should that occur, end quote. The reason why is because willful negligence, okay, I get that, but I feel like in the last clause of the second sentence, quote, and are liable for their acts of willful negligence and fraud, to me, when I read that, I feel like it assumes that there will be willful negligence and fraud. I feel like there's an assumption there that these negative acts will take place. So by inserting the words, should that occur, we're not making this assumption that corporations are evil or that corporations as a group entity will act in bad ways, even though in some cases they have been proven to do so. So I want us to get rid of, to me, there's a presupposed supposition there that I wanted to address. Now, the second thing, and I think Mr. Roots mentioned this, I would like to propose some language to say, we reject government charters of corporations. My understanding of how corporations are started is that they basically are chartered by their home state.
Mr.
So what you
Fast?
have is, yes?
You're going a bit afield. You could say that you would intend in the future to offer such an amendment, but getting into a debate on an amendment that's not yet right is improper.
Okay, well, so can I then submit my first proposal for an amendment and then just a general comment that I would like to see a different amendment down the road?
Certainly. So you're amending the amendment. So at the end of the current amended language from Mr. Cholko, you would like to change that period to a comma and add the phrase, should it occur?
Well, should that occur?
Should that occur?
Yes.
Okay. So now we are too deep in the amendment process. So now we will be speaking solely at this point to Mr. Fast's amendment until there is a vote on that. Ms. Mattson?
Okay, I want to point out that the edited second sentence, I think, says something that you don't mean for it to say. Technically, it says the incorporators, presuming that there refers back to the antecedent corporations, or it could be read to say this. The incorporators are responsible for, say 50 years later, when the original incorporators are no longer on the board, it's the people who incorporated the entity that are liable for them, rather than the individuals who committed the acts in question. I think that's not an intended reading, but it's an entirely possible reading, that you're holding the incorporators responsible for every future act of the corporation, whether or not they are, on the board of the entity at the time the problem happens, or even responsible for, or even live. So I don't think that reads the way it's intended.
Okay.
I'd like to speak also.
Okay, I granted Ms. Mattson some leeway just so people could start considering that we really should only be speaking to the should that occur portion right now. So we cannot do any other levels of amendment till that second level there is disposed of. So is there any debate on should that occur language?
Well,
Yes, Mr.
I
Roots.
could debate many points, but with regard to this last proposal, this language at the very end that is proposed, there's a problem in that even if I wanted corporations to be liable for whatever, why limit it to willful negligence and fraud should it occur, or whatnot? I mean, why not intentional tort, assaults, rapes, and willful negligence? What about willful trespasses? Negligence, is an accident. A willful negligence is a something that is an intentional accident. So this is just horrible. This whole thing is horrible. This last sentence is horrible. And should that occur is one of those. It doesn't fix all these problems.
Okay, Mr. Fulmer.
My question was a request. Am I correct that if I vote in favor of the should that occur to be part of Cholko's amendment, and then the Cholko amendment fails, the should that occur still disappears? Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
It would have to be reproposed. Okay, anyone else?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Fast?
It's my understanding that we are only debating should that occur. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Once that has been taken care of, I have a separate amendment that I'd like to introduce.
Okay, Mr. Fulner and then Ms. Matson.
Nothing further from me, sorry.
Ms. Matson?
I don't see the point of the extra words at all, should that occur. I mean, obviously, we don't think they should be liable for it if it didn't occur. And I don't think we're implying that automatically it's going to occur just because it is a corporation. So I just don't see the purpose of these last three words, so I will vote against adding them.
Mr. Knapp?
Yeah, I'll also vote against the amendment. I think that just removing the word there would accomplish the same intent.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Fast?
this is a question for Mr. Knapp. I think he said eliminating the word there. Could he expand on that, please?
Sure, if you remove the word there, then individuals who form corporations must be liable for acts of willful negligence and fraud. That would accomplish that, if there are acts, those people are liable for them. If there aren't, they aren't. So we don't need should that occur if we just get rid of the word there.
I'm not sure how omitting there accomplishes that, but okay.
Okay, anyone else? All right, Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready, what we are doing right now is just voting on whether or not to add the phrase "should that occur" to the end of the Cholco amended text.
Yes. Matt Choco.
Nay.
Ms. Epke stepped out. Richard Fast.
Yes.
Jim Fulner.
Yes.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Duke Van Horn.
No.
Thomas Knapp.
No.
Cat Martin.
No.
Al Meckley.
No.
Dale Perry.
Daryl votes no.
Omar Crow votes no. Roger Roots.
I'll just vote yes.
Alicia Matson.
I vote no.
Curry Taylor.
No.
That was a no, sir?
No.
Okay.
We have
Did I-
Mr. Longstreth in the room who could step in for Ms. Epke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Longstreth.
No.
I will add Mr. Longstreth to the list now. Madam Chair, I show 311 no express abstentions.
Yep, that is what I have. That amendment fails. We are back to the Cholco amendment. And at that time, there were people in line. There was, hold on one second. We had Fulner, Perry, Fast, and myself. Does Mr. Fulner, would you like to speak?
Oh, thank you.
Mr. Perry?
Yes, I will speak, and if it's in order, I would propose an amendment to change the words individuals who form corporations to be members and shareholders of corporations, and also strike the word there from the final part where it currently says liable for their acts of willful negligence and fraud.
Okay, let me read this aloud. So it would read, we believe that corporate entities are not people. Whoa, you killed it on me. 1 second. All right, we believe that corporate entities are not people and possess no rights distinct from the individuals within them. Members and shareholders of corporations must be liable for acts of willful negligence and fraud. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, there was a question in the chat of what is a member of a corporation. I've actually had to file corporate paperwork in New Hampshire for a couple of things, and it requires a list of members, and generally people will list either the people that serve on the board or shareholders or some combination thereof. So the reason that I chose the word member is because in at least New Hampshire, there is a legal distinction of a member of a corporation. And I don't know if in every state that is necessarily distinct from a shareholder.
I'd like to speak on that.
Okay, well, all right. But I have Mr. Fast and myself and then Roots. Mr. Fast.
Okay, so I'd like to propose an amendment.
Can't at this point. We're 2 amendments deep again.
Okay, can you put me on the queue once this one has been resolved?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Hey, myself, I'm going to just speak briefly now that we're back to a broader discussion in support of points that Mr. Fulmer and various others made, I believe Mr. Perry as well, about liability and the way there, you talked about the photon blaster and you knew it was going to cause harm. And that resonated with me for the need for we need to say something, because I have one company name to say for you, and that's Gruenthal. If you don't know who they were the makers of thalidomide, and they knew damn well that that medicine was producing deformed babies. But because there was only the corporate liability, they raked in what they could. And that is not libertarian. And that is a crying shame that those people were not personally automatically on the hook. Now, there were proceedings to pierce the corporate veil later on, but there was a chance that those would not pass. The de facto state was that they could not be liable unless further action was taken. And you take one look at those kids and tell me that's right. That ain't right. Okay, I have Mr. Roots.
Okay, all of us are members of a corporation. That is the Libertarian Party. We are all members of the Libertarian Party. Do we want, let's say if the Libertarian Party commits willful negligence or fraud, which is possible, especially the willful negligence part. I can imagine many scenarios where the Libertarian Party would commit willful negligence. I can see that. It would actually happen. Do we want to be liable? Do we want our homes, our cars to be on the hook? That would actually prevent people from joining the Libertarian Party and becoming members of the Libertarian Party. This whole notion that, there needs to be liability for all harms in the world. Most of the harms in the world, there is no liability. The chair just talked about thalidomide and things. Most of the Fortune 500, most of the large for-profit corporations that market a product that is dangerous and harms people, they are damaged. They get what's coming to them. The value of their shares and their stock goes way down. Often they are bankrupted, liquidated. But I guess the chair wants the stockholders of the company that put out thalidomide. You really want the stockholders who all they did is invest in a corporation? You really want them to lose their homes, Madam Chair? This is just are we the Democratic Party or are we the Libertarian Party? This is not a libertarian proposal.
Point of information. The chair is on mute right now.
I couldn't find the button. Okay, yes, Mr. Secretary.
Could you place the text, if you have it, in the chat? Because I'm sorry, I was just doing 3 things and I just missed it.
I will ask Mr. Perry to do that, since I need to pay attention to the log here.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I'm going to take a liberty to speak, since Mr. Roots did do like a point of information sort of towards me, and I would be very brief. Mr. Roots, I did not say I specifically favored this language. I did say I specifically favored the concept, however it was massaged. And in the case of Gruenthal, the principals walked away and formed another company. And I'm not saying the language right now is best, but I am saying there is something rotten in Denmark. Mr. Meckley.
I don't disagree that something is rotten there, but making every stockholder liable is not the correct solution, and it would be the kiss of death for anybody who was looking at, who was interested in the Libertarian Party.
Thank you, Mr. Meckley. Any further debate? And we are really, we've gone a bit wider because I think it's almost impossible to stick entirely just to the Perry language. But what we are on right now, if we are going to proceed to a vote, is the Perry amendment language. The way it would read is now in chat. So what he had done is struck the word, you posted it wrong, Mr. Perry. I think you were supposed to strike there.
Yes, I forgot to remove the word there.
So he was striking the word there from before willful, and he also struck individuals who form corporations and made it members and shareholders of corporations. That is the change from the Cholco language. If there is no further debate on the Perry amendment to the Cholco amendment, Ms. Mattson.
Just briefly, I want to point out that I'm on the board of a corporation that has neither members nor shareholders. And so I mean, obviously I object to this language and I intend to vote no, but I don't think this is even what the mover intends to cover, because what are the owners called? We're board members. There's a legal definition of what the corporate members are, and our corporate charter specifically says we do not have members in that sense, and we do not sell stock. It's not a publicly traded entity. It's not even a private stock entity. There is no stock.
Thank you, Ms. Mattson. Anyone further? Okay, seeing none. Mr.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Fast?
Yeah, so shareholders I get. I'm wondering if Mr. Perry could expand on what he means by members of corporations. Is that supposed to mean that just the people who make up a corporation, or what does he mean by a member, quote unquote?
Mr. Perry, if you would like to answer.
Yeah, I thought I already did answer that earlier. Again, at least in New Hampshire, all corporate paperwork filed with the Secretary of State has to include a list of members, and they are not necessarily shareholders. And Ms. Mattson brought up that in California, it also asks for members, but apparently there can be a corporation with no members. I don't exactly know how that works. But, again, members of a corporation is a legally distinct thing and is not necessarily shareholders, although it could be.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Is there any, okay, I have Ms. Mattson.
I put it in the chat, but I don't remember if we have people on the phone that can't see the chat, but the LP's corporate charter also says we don't have members in the legal sense of the definition of what members are. So it's not a unique to California thing. The LP is incorporated in DC. Members is more commonly used, I think, in the sense Mr. Perry is thinking with LLCs, maybe, rather than corporations. But, that definition is going to vary from state to state.
Okay, I'm going to add myself to the queue. And hearing the discussion, what I think the intent of the maker is, and he can correct me if I am wrong, and I'm speaking actually to all the makers, Mr. Fulner, Mr. Choko, Mr. Perry, is for people to be liable proportional to their amount of investment. People with minimal investment have minimal risk. I think more vague language is what they're looking for here, and to avoid the whole idea of members, shareholders, principals, formers, whatever. I think what you're looking for is people who have a financial investment. And I would suggest that somebody might want to consider, I'm not going to do this, giving the framers some opportunity to finesse this amongst themselves outside of the committee and bring it back next committee. But again, I'm not moving that. It's just a suggestion. If I was on point at all, and I might not have been. I could have been way off base.
Mrs. Harlows, can I speak to that?
Yes, Mr. Fulner.
So your discussion of my assumed position is accurate. That is what I personally believe. I didn't put that language in here because I didn't feel that all libertarians necessarily agree with that. I thought my original proposal was better in being more broad than this latter one, but that's only my personal position. That may not be.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Secretary, you had your hand up briefly.
No, never mind. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, if there are no further amendments, motions, or debate, we will move to vote on Mr. Perry's changes, and I'll restate them again, because we had further debate after I restated them last time. It is to remove the word "there" before "willful," and instead of individuals who form corporations, it would be members and shareholders of corporations. And Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready.
Yes. Matt Choko.
Pass.
Richard Longstreth.
No.
Richard Fast.
Abstain.
Jim Fulner.
Abstain.
Helen Gilson.
Abstain.
Duke Van Horn.
No.
Thomas Knapp.
Abstain.
Cat Martin.
Abstain.
Al Meckley.
No.
Daryl Perry.
Yes.
Omar Recurl will vote nay. Roger Roots.
Nay.
You mean that again?
Nay.
No, he said.
Lisa Matson.
I vote no.
Terry Taylor.
No.
Okay. Did anyone pass? Yeah, Matt Choko.
I'm gonna vote no.
Okay. With that, did I miss anyone? Madam Chair, this is a weird one. I show 1 yay, 8 nay, 5 express abstentions.
Yep, that's what I have. So the Perry amendment fails. We are now back to the Cholko amendment. So it's back to a first. Yes, I was going to call on you, Mr. Fast. So we are back to a first level of amendment. Mr. Fast asked to be first on deck when we were at that point. So I have Mr. Fast and then Mr. Cholko. Mr. Fast.
Okay, so I'd like to propose an amendment, and this is to add at the end of the proposal these two sentences. Quote, "We reject government charters of corporations. We call for a separation of business and state."
Mr. Fast, I believe that goes beyond the Cholko amendment. I didn't know that's what you were referring to, or I tell you at that time. Your amendment of an amendment has to be directly germane to the primary amendment. What you are looking for is waiting until we get back to no amendments till we're back to a primary motion. And I could put you first on deck when we have that, if that's the type of amendment you're seeking to add.
Yes. Okay, then come back to me at that time, please.
Okay, certainly. Mr. Tolko and Mr. Taylor.
I'm gonna put my hand back down for a minute.
Okay.
I'll speak on it.
Oh, go on.
The statement, we believe that corporate entities are not people. There's no one in the world who would disagree with that. No one on earth would disagree with that. So it's, we're just pandering to the dumb.
Mr. Roots, right now we are on the Cholko amendment. You're really speaking to the main, and I know before I allowed some wide latitude, but we need to get to a primary motion right now. And both of them contain the issue about people. When we get to that point, we can go back to the people argument. But if we could stick to what Mr. Cholko did, which is cleaning up the sentences and adding "we believe that."
All right, well, no one does not believe that. No one in the world.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Taylor, I think I passed you over mistakenly.
Move to strike the word "there."
Okay.
And just to agree with the original person who made that amendment originally, I think it adds to the specificity of what we're trying to say.
Yeah, Mr. Secretary, when you put back up the Cholko final text, you left off the word "there" that was in. Oh, there it is. Never mind. Ah, my eyes were crossing. Got it. So Mr. Taylor is striking the word "there." All right.
I'm on top of it.
Okay, I wasn't. Thank you. Would you like to speak any further to that, Mr. Taylor?
I don't think so.
Okay. Mr. Cholko?
Yeah, I'm going to vote no to the Taylor amendment. I actually support that change, but I think we need to dispose of the Cholko amendment, and then this and most of these other changes that we've been talking about for a little while could apply to whatever becomes whatever is the main motion that we're working on. I think it's time to dispose of Cholko and figure out where we are, and then work the language from there.
Thank you. Ms. Mattson?
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is the correct time to take up their amendment. I think it's intended as an alternate solution to some other part, but it doesn't seem germane to the pending amendment on this part. So I think we're kind of handling too many things at once. But when we get there, I'm going to point out that removing the word "there" makes it worse. Then it's not for which acts of willful negligence and fraud, just in general in the universe, or by whom?
Thank you, Ms. Mattson. Anyone further? Okay, hearing none. We are coming up to 7, just to let everyone know. I think it would make everyone really happy if we just got through the Cholko amendment before leaving, but of course that is up to you guys. So we're going to move to a vote on removing the word "there." And pending no further debate, which there can be, it's your right to, we will then move to a vote on the Cholko amendment. Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready.
Oh, sorry. Matt Sokol.
Nay.
Richard Longstreth.
No.
Richard Fast.
Yes.
Jim Fulner.
No.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Duke Van Horn.
No.
Thomas Knapp.
Yes.
Cat Martin.
Yes.
Al Meckley.
No.
Dale Perry.
Yes.
Omar Curl votes abstain. Roger Roots.
Yes.
Alicia Matson.
I vote no.
Curry Taylor.
Yes.
Okay. Did we pass anyone? No. 14 votes. 6 yay, 7 nay, 1 express abstention, Madam Chair.
I'll not vote. So it fails.
6 yay, 7 nay.
Right, it fails.
Yes.
I'm not going to vote to cause a tie. Well, it still failed if I cause a tie. Never mind. So it fails, clearly. Now, is there any further debate on the Cholco amendments, or can we move to a vote?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
I'm sorry to hold us up. I'm just struggling with the wording here. You know what? Never mind. It's for another time. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Anyone further? Okay, we are going to proceed to a vote on the Cholco amendments. If it passes, the primary motion will read, we believe that corporate entities are not people and possess no rights distinct from the individuals within them. Individuals who form corporations must be liable for their acts of willful negligence and fraud. If that passes, that's now the primary. If it fails, we are back to the original language, which is corporate entities are not people and possess no rights distinct from the individuals within them. Individuals who form corporations neither gain nor lose any right they had previous to incorporation and are liable for their acts of willful negligence and fraud. Is everyone clear as to what we are voting on? Okay, Mr. Secretary, whenever you are ready.
Matt Choco.
Yes.
Richard Longstreth.
No.
Richard Fass.
Yes.
Jim Fulner.
No.
Helen Gilson.
No.
Duke Van Horn.
No.
Thomas Knapp.
Yes.
Cam Martin.
Pass.
Al Meckley.
No.
Dale Perry.
Yes.
Omar Crow votes nay. Roger Roots.
I'll abstain.
Brian, no. Alicia Matson.
I'm still debating here, so I guess I'll temporarily pass.
You're going to pass?
Correct.
Curry Taylor.
Yes.
Okay. Now back to, what did I miss? Cat Martin. Miss Martin.
No.
And now we return to Miss Matson.
I'm just going to abstain.
Okay. If I didn't miss anyone, Madam Chair, I show 5 yay, 7 nay, 2 express abstentions.
Yep, that's also what I have. So the Cholco language fails. We are back to the original, and our time is going to be up for this.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Cholco.
Richard Fast.
We can. We do not have it.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I have a proposal, a motion.
I'm not accepting anymore at this time. It's 6:58. I have some closing announcements to make.
We have 2 minutes left.
I understand that, Mr. Fast, but I have some other committee business to discuss, and we have this on the agenda for next meeting. I'm really going to suggest that everyone with potential amendments hash them out in email, and it will save a lot of time to get a consensus before our next meeting. these are words to the wise. You can not do it, but Mr. Cholko. Okay, he lowered his hand.
I'm good. You pretty much addressed what I was going to talk about there, so we're good.
Okay, so we have 2 more meetings coming up. The only thing that's left on the proposed agendas, and there is no more lead time to add anything, is this plank. So if we finish with this next meeting, the following meeting after that is canceled. In the meantime, I'm going to be preparing items for the survey. If you have a minority report that you would like to be included in the survey, you need to get that to me as soon as possible. Not getting it to me as soon as possible does not preclude you from entering one later for the convention, but it will not be included on the survey. And I like to have them included on the survey because it really gives us a wide scope of how party members feel. So next week is when I plan on the survey going out. So get me your minority reports this week. Okay, with that, our next meeting, I believe, well, it's on the schedule in the group, and that will be it for this meeting. So we are adjourned at exactly 7.